Tech Canada's Deeper Insights webinar series. My name is Ruth Ann, and it is always my pleasure to be the host for these presentations. So today I would ask you to use the question box for any of your questions and comments as we go through our presentation. And I am going to introduce to you Derek Bildfell. Now, Derek and I have had a little bit of an ongoing kind of chat relationship. So this is one of the first times I've actually got to see Derek in person. So this is a delight for me as well. Derek is the CEO of Acceleration Strategy Incorporated, and it's a consulting firm focusing on the implementation of customer and employee experience programs. And he has been aligning these two with his clients to help them set up their corporate strategies. He is also a professor of CX design at Centennial College, Toronto ambassador of the Customer Experience Professionals Association since 2010. You've got a long CV here, Derek, and I know that you're going to touch on a number of these things as you go through your presentation. So without further ado, welcome, Derek.
Thank you, Ruth Ann. And of course, you know, a long CV just means you're old. But I teach at, as I said, Customer Experience Design. It's about a 42-hour program. And then I also provide training to executives who are trying to adopt customer experience. So I took that great big 42-hour program and turned it into about 25 hours to really get people able to really achieve customer experience success in their organizations. Then I took that down to a 4-hour program, which I teach in the CEO programs through Tech Canada in the 4-hour briefings. And then Ruth Ann said, but could you do it in 45 minutes? So strap on your seat. There's going to be way too much stuff in 45 minutes. My goal here is to show you how customer experience is going to actually pretty dramatically change the value of your organization. So while we know that Warren Buffett is one of the most brilliant value investors, he always leads with, does the company operate at a low risk, at a low cost, and with a differentiated position going into the market? And if they do, then he considers buying them. And that's why it took him a long time to get into tech, because he couldn't understand the risk, he couldn't understand the cost models on how they would be compellingly differentiating over time. Now that he's figured that out, he's now moving into that space. But of course, we know Buffett, famous for the work that he's done in Gillette, Lever Brothers over time that have been made him very successful. But those companies, when you dig into them, they really had a dominant position on the way they understood their customers. And what I want to tell you right now is it doesn't really matter what you do today. CX is already changing the value of your company. You are either getting more valuable or less value depending on how you are really differentiating your company in the customer and employee experience realm. So that's what I'm going to take you through today. And again, I encourage questions anytime. I am not a webinar guy. I am all about doing face-to-face, used to be, but real-time discussions so that you can reflect on what I say and then ask the questions. I believe that's the best way for people to learn. So let's get started and go back to our friend, Mr. Buffett. So Warren Buffett says risk is critical. How do you understand and mitigate risk? Well, in the customer experience realm, if you think about it, if you understand your customers better, you know what's going on in their minds at all time. Let's assume you had perfect knowledge and understanding of your customer. Then when you're doing a bid, you would never lose because you would know what was going on. Your risk of losing customers drops as your understanding of the customer and your systematic, really nuanced understanding of whether you have any potential risks with that customer. When those go down, the risk to your business go down. As a small businessman myself, my biggest concern always is what's going to happen with my biggest customer. I'm always trying to find out more from them. The second thing that Buffett says is that if you want to have a compellingly strong company, then you need a cost advantage. You need to be able to weather the difficult times, compete when you have to on very aggressive terms. And when you're acquiring company, if your organization has a cost or an operational model that is dominant in the industry, is competitively differentiating in the industry, then your ability to acquire and grow companies also improves. if you are running your business along good customer experience focus, if you're saying, I'm going to only do the things that matter to my customer, you will by default, whether you want to or not, invest in those things that give you a cost advantage in the customer's mind. And then finally, obviously, if you understand your customers better, you are going to build up your business to serve them according to what they value, not according to what your internal organization says you should do. If a customer says, I want this and I'll pay for it, you're going to do it. So we're going to try to understand those things at a very deep level. And what happens when you increase value for the customer, economic theory says that a increasing value will be shared in some way between the customer and the creator of that value, between the employee and the company if the employee creates the value. So the point here on value creation is if you just focus on creating value, you can figure out how you're going to share in that. Maybe you charge 10% of the value you create, maybe you charge 90% of the value you create. That's really not the important point. The important point is that you're creating the value based on what's the customer priorities. So I'm going to take you through over the next few minutes how this is done. But first, let's get started with a little bit of perspective. In the 30s-ish, this company came up with their strategy and articulated such that they said, whatever you do, do it well. Do it so well that when people experience it, they will want to come back and experience it again. And they will want to bring others and show them how well you do what you do. That can be everybody's customer experience strategy, right? Doesn't matter who you are. Some variant of that can be your story. This guy came up with it. It's still the fundamental strategy. And as I'm sure most of you guessed, I'm talking about Walt Disney. Okay, so Walt Disney came up with this strategy. It was really his inner view. It was his CEO's perspective. And at the time, he was just a designer and a dreamer. But he said, this is what I want to do. And he has been maniacal about it and has now, I think currently it's the 5th most valuable brand in the world. And it's been that way for like the last 10, 15 years. But he set this and kept this strategy ever since 1934 or some year like that. It was around that. They actually did quite well in the 30s, in the worst downturn ever. But can you guys do that? Well, let's look at the entire market overall. The market overall. There's some research that was done by the Watermark Consulting Group back in 2011 and has been continued ever since. And they look at, if they look at something that Forrester does, which is Forrester looks at all the companies in the S&P 500, say, and says, are they customer experience leaders, laggards, or in between? And this is a set of research that they do with all these companies. This is what Forrester's famous for, understanding the market conditions and doing lots of interviews and turning this into syndicated research. So Watermark takes this list of leaders, laggards, and in-betweens over any 5-year period and says, what's their total return to market, full dividend reinvestment? And in any 5-year period, leaders outperform laggards by 75 points. So what happened in the market is this started getting a lot of press in the late 2010, 2012 timeframe. CEOs start seeing this. And if I'm a CEO at the time and I see this, I go, okay, I see that the leaders are making way more than the laggards. Hey, Mr. President, hey, Mr. Senior Management Team, where are we? And you would hope that the CEO could say, well, we got a whole big program, we're doing a good job, we're monitoring our customer experience, we have all these proactive design programs, we're in good shape. The reality is less than 10% of people can even answer that question, right? So then what the chair and the CEO are going to say is, we need a strategy. And they turn around and they go pick their biggest shooter in the company and says, guys, we need to be on the leader's side, not the laggard side, because it appears that's an indicator of great wealth. And that's what we're here for, all right? So I'll spend a lot of time on this talking about what are the real financial drivers that allow customer experience leaders to really lead the market. And that's what we do in the overall programs. Obviously, I have to truncate it down to this very small capsule. So I hope you followed that little idea. Because fundamentally, what I'm telling you over this first 10 minutes of our talk today is that people who understand and systematically manage the customer experience phenomenally greater return, and the value of their company goes up, plus their annual operating profit goes up. And I'm going to take you through that before we leave today. So what is this customer experience of which I speak? There's a lot of definitions of it. And you can't just go out and say to people, we provide a good experience, believe us and come, because that won't work. What customer experience is really nothing more than the collected perceptions of everything I've ever had to do with your company. So what your CEO said, what your advertisements say, how your product works, and of course, what happens when you phone 1-800-HELP-ME, all right? All of those things factor into your perception of, do you really like that company? And we'll talk about why those perceptions are important in a few minutes. But you can't just tell people. People learn, they get perceptions and beliefs because of their experiences. So all you can really do is manage the customer experience. And so when we're managing the customer experience, what we're doing is saying, do we have a discipline that ensures that we are continuously improving the customer experience as defined by the perception customers have of us? That was a big mouthful. Customer experience management is a discipline, and that's what we talk about in this program. We don't talk about the perceptions, all kinds of cool stuff, but what's the discipline that allows us to establish the perceptions that change the future of our business? And that's what we're going to talk about. So customer experience is not customer service. Let's be clear about that. If you think of Igor and Ivan in the big trampoline act and the big acrobatics act at a circus, the customer experience, the intentional experience is that they do this beautiful triple flip and Igor grabs Ivan. But unfortunately, sometimes he doesn't grab him. And when he doesn't, sorry, I'm having a little bit of a hard time with my screen management here. Something's not coming through on the screen, sorry. So when he doesn't catch him though, that safety net is really the customer service. And when it bounces that Igor and Ivan all the way back up to the top, and then Igor grabs Ivan, that's a brilliant customer service strategy, but that should not be your customer experience design strategy. That should not be how you're trying to establish the customer perception. And the reason is, frankly, if everything is done through your customer service organization, you will end up with failures and you will end up with a reduced customer experience. So what you want is an intentionally designed experience that meets the customer's need. What does that really mean? So we're going to go through the hierarchy right now really quickly, because this hierarchy, if you understand it, can be applied to everything you do in customer experience. So let's think back. You guys are running businesses. If your business is effective, then your customer is essentially satisfied. And when they're satisfied, then you actually retain the customer. So back in the day, we had a lot of customer sat programs, and customer sat was really, did I do the job? And if I did the job, you're going to stay. And then suddenly a bunch of people came along and started making things easier and less expensive. And if you were not focused on constantly driving greater ease and less expense in your customer programs, then your retention thing would go to naught. But if you are being more easy, if you are easier than all of your competition, or you're just really easy in my perception, then when I want to buy the next product from you, say today I'm buying widgets, next week I want something that's like the widget, I'll come to you and say, hey, do you have any of these other things? And if you do, I'm going to buy it really quickly. That's the source of organic growth. Organic growth is when you are not just meeting the need, but perceived to meet the need in such a way that if I had another similar need, whether it's buying another product or a product that is adjacent to the one that I'm currently buying from you, then my organic growth rate is going to go up because I'm easier than average. All right. Organic growth rate happens to be one of the biggest drivers of overall market valuation. So just do one thing more than you're currently doing. I know everybody here is satisfying their customers. Go one step more and be easier and be more attentive, and you're going to get an increase in organic growth. And that's going to happen every time. But what everybody talks about is the next level up, which is when you transcend your product and service to being emotionally connected to your customer. And I know some of you in the B2B space are saying, well, we're not going to do the emotional connection thing. You are. And the emotional connection in B2B is, do I believe that working with you is going to improve my career? If you are working with somebody and you are making it more likely that they will be successful in their career, you are transcending your product into an enjoyable phase. So what we want to do is get our services and offerings transcendent and connected to the values of our customers, not just the values of what we're delivering in a product. What this means is we will achieve advocacy. That's what we want to do, right? You've all heard of this term, advocacy. And what happened? Advocacy, the term advocate means a person who will speak on my behalf when I'm not able to. And I'm only going to do that if I really believe in what you do, and I think that I have a story to tell. And the story could be about the value alignment, the enjoyment I had in your product. I bought this great product. It was phenomenal. I enjoyed it. I had this issue with the company. I called the guys on Friday. I said, I've got to get something done by Monday. They worked all weekend, delivered it. I got a huge pat on the back by the boss. When that happens, right, then now I've got a story, and I'm going to advocate that story when I'm at the next industry meeting. I'm at the industry conference. We're talking about vendors, and I say, well, you should see my vendor. This is what they did for me. That's what you have to do for advocacy. It's not just asking an NPS question. An NPS question is not going to get you advocacy. You need to create stories, and you need to create connection that transcends the product and service. We take this concept and apply it against everything you do. The way you engage with your customers, the way you reinforce the positive things you do, the way you design your new offerings, all of those are being looked at through this lens of the hierarchy of customer experience. Okay. And then, if that's the case, the next chart that I want to show you is the single most important thing in customer experience. Because when what we talked about was managing the customer experience to establish a perception, right? Okay, so let's take this little example. If I say I'm going to meet you at noon, and I show up at noon, the experience is that I walked in the room at noon. Your perception is I'm on time. If I, on the flip side, say I'm going to meet you at noon, and I walk in at 10 after, the experience is that I was 10 minutes late. Your perception is Derek's a late guy. And if I keep doing that, you will generate a belief that I'm a late guy. But in that same experience, if I'm coming down to meet you at noon, and I run into a bit of a traffic jam on the highway, and I call immediately, say, oh my God, I was on the way, but I'm in a traffic jam. And I show up and I say, I'm going to be there at 10 afternoon, and I show up at 9 minutes after noon. The experience is the exact same. I showed up at 10 afternoon. But the perception is, I'm a guy who cares about you. I'm a guy who's reliable, and I'm not going to be left hanging. So what I'm telling you is that managing the experience is not the job. The job is to manage both the expectation and the experience to create a perception, and those perceptions, when created and repeated over time, become beliefs. Everything you do, every decision you take, and every action you take is fundamentally based on a belief. So your belief actually leads to your behaviors. So the behaviors that we're talking about in this case are, do you decide to repurchase my product? Do you decide to recommend me to a friend? Do you agree to work with me on a co-creation project? All of those behaviors are all based on your beliefs, which have been developed over your entire lifetime of every interaction you've had with my company. So if you look at your company right now and you say, you know what, I don't think we have the customer experience level that we want. I don't think customers perceive us in quite the way that we would like, and therefore we're not getting the level of repurchase, the level of engagement that we would like. I would typically ask my students at this point, Okay, if that's the case, what will you do? How many choices do you have? You fundamentally have two choices. You can understand why the experience is not meeting the expectation and fix that, or you can understand what expectations you're setting and realize that you're setting the wrong expectations and change the design of your experience and the communication of your experience so that you are now meeting the expectation and the experience are in alignment to create the perceptions that you want. That's fundamentally what we do in customer experience. So this is a very different way of looking at surveys and journey mapping. So instead of thinking of a survey as giving you an evaluation, what you think of is any input you get from a customer, does it allow you to understand whether there's a gap in the experience? And if there's a gap in the experience, do you have an appropriate mechanism to address that gap? So for example, if the customer had a bad experience versus expectation and it's surfaced up to your manager, does he have the ability to go and start immediately coaching that frontline person to improve their experience delivery? Flip side is, our guys executed everything perfectly, but the expectation of the customer was slightly different than what we did. And that was really because we did not articulate clearly what our offering is. Do we have to go back and redesign our offering and restate our offering so that we can set the expectation according to what we're delivering? Those are the kind of the two options that we've talked about quite a lot. So this is kind of a powerful thought when you think about, how do I approach customer experience? How do I drive the change? You drive the change by driving the perceptions, and you can only drive the perceptions by managing the experience and the expectations. The rest just follows naturally. Okay, let me pause here for a second in case there's any questions, because I'm going pretty fast, I know, so I should probably slow down just a touch. But is there any questions or comments at this point in time that Ruth has in the chat room?
So Derek, no questions right now, but one of the things that I do want to sort of touch on while people are maybe typing in if they've got something is, again, you mentioned discipline. And can you sort of say, can you frame discipline in terms of how disciplined do you have to be about expectations? And what does that look like?
So the discipline around expectations is really that you have what we call an intended experience. So that says things aren't happening haphazard in your organization. The discipline is, we know what we're doing with and for our customers. We've defined it in such a manner that we know what people are going to do. So there's a practice called customer journey mapping. And what we do is we say, what is the experience we want the customer to have when engaging with us at all the many touch points? And when we've defined that, we ensure that we have a discipline that says, if that's what we want them to do we have the operational processes to provide that particular experience at that particular touch point to the customer? And when I say the discipline, what you have is a customer experience management responsibility in the company. It could be a person, it could be a whole group, or it could be 20% of someone's job, but they have a set activity of saying, here's how I evaluate the experience, and here's how I drive an improvement against the experience based on the expectations we've set with the customer. And that's, we kind of do that through a survey, but it's designed to elicit the alignment and identify the gaps between the experience and the expectations.
Great. And what I'm hearing here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this should also be fluid and dynamic. It's not a one-shot pony.
Yes, it's an operational model inside the company. And that operational model might be quarterly, but it's not a one-shot pony, absolutely not. This is a practice, because what we're trying to do is achieve something called customer centricity across the organization. It's, like I said, it's not just the front line. It's the guy designing the product. It's the person sending the bills. Those are all parts of the customer experience. You know that if you make a mistake on the bill, you've created a perception in the customer's mind. And the perception is you're not high enough quality. Okay? So it's a really important stuff.
Excellent.
So,
well, carry on.
All right, so here's another exercise for you guys. I want you to picture this. I walk into your office and I say, I've just talked to your customers. You've got 100 customers, and 50 of them are promoters, 20 of them are passive, and 30 are detractors. And in return, I said, anybody who was a promoter, I said, why are you a promoter? I said, anybody who was a passive, I said, what can we do better? Anyone who was a detractor, I said, why are you a detractor? And I give that to you as a CEO. What do you do first? What's nice about the concept of, this is the concept of NPS, what's the nice about the concept of promoters, passives, and detractors is I didn't tell you the questions, I didn't tell you the scales, nothing. All I did was tell you who was promoter, passive, and detractor. And if you're like me, or if you're like a mother and you tell them that they have an ugly baby with beautiful blue eyes, then you will focus on the detractors right away. It's intuitive. I don't want anybody speaking negatively about my company. Then when I have time, and if I'm a workaholic, as soon as I've gotten through all the detractors, I'm going to go to the promoters and say, what am I doing really well? Because I'm going to find those customers. I want to find more promoters because I'm clearly providing a great value prop to people who value this particular perspective. And then you're going to take your passives and you're going to say, hey guys, whoever's responsible for this, I got 20 people who are giving me a recommendation on how we can improve. Can you guys look at that and figure out where your immediate improvements are? So this is the model for NPS, and it's not the question. I didn't tell you about the question here. It's about understanding how to take the information you get from a survey and turn it into an immediate improvement in the value of your company. All right, so we spend quite a bit of time on this concept quite often about understanding how do we really elicit the right responses and the right set of questions, not just how likely are you to recommend, but why, is there something we're doing wrong, a bunch of other attributes, are we responsive, are we proactive, and we use those to say what are the true drivers of promoter and detraction, and how can we change that in the organization. All right, and so just if you'd like to know, net promoter is you take your total promoters, percentage of promoters, minus your total percentage of detractors, and you get what we call a net promoter score. It is a number between negative 100 and 100. I don't care what anyone's score is. What I care about is that you have a plan or initiative or a program as appropriate to your company to drive improvement against that score year over year. Because if you reduce the number of detractors and increase the number of promoters, your company's value goes up. And that's the fundamental concept here. Let's talk a little bit about how that works. Let's think of all of your companies, all of your customers, total revenue divided by the number of customers. That's going to get you your average customer revenue base. And if we multiply that times the average lifetime of your customer, say it's 5 years, if you have a $1,000 average customer times 5-year average, you have a $5,000 average lifetime value of your customers. Okay? Everybody with me still? I gotta be careful because I'm gonna do a really small bit of math. Now, if I say this bunch of guys are my promoters and this bunch of guys are my detractors, because I've got that survey that Derek just did, I'm gonna ask you, how much more valuable are the promoters versus the detractors on that base revenue of $5,000 for sake of argument? I hope you intuitively said, I think the promoters are more valuable, but I'm not quite sure why, because they're both the same amount of money. There are a lot of reasons, and I don't have time to go through all of them, but let's look at a few things. I'm gonna ask you to think about it from a customer value, which will be obvious. If you have promoters, are they impacting the operational value or the employee value of your organization? And if you have more promoters, what is the impact on your overall company value? So when you think about it, just the customer, when I talk to the customer, if I look at my promoters, all right, my promoters are typically the people who are easier to serve, have a lower cost to serve, and because they have a lower cost to serve, they are inherently a higher margin customer. All right, because they like us and they don't call us and say, look, I'm really ticked off, this didn't work today. They call us and say, hey, I think we're having a problem with this part of the project. How can we work together to solve it? That's a completely different cost experience. So your promoters are typically lower cost to serve, and remember the pyramid, promoters are probably up in the top higher end of the pyramid, so therefore they are going to have a higher organic growth rate. So while you think about them as having a $5,000 average lifetime value, their lifetime value is accelerated for two reasons. One, because they are higher margin, and two, because they grow faster. On the flip side, your detractors, they're going to argue with you every time they got to buy another product. They're going to say, well, I might buy yours or I might buy somebody else's. I'm not really sure. So you get a declining market share. And when they have a problem, they say, your problem, you fix it, get back to me, and I'm not going to buy anything else until you fix it. Your cost to serve detractors is typically much higher. The next thing we talk about is retention of employees. Everybody knows that longer serving, more engaged employees can be about 40 to 50% more valuable than disengaged employees. And the cost to replace employees is very, very high. If you have a high promoter environment, people like working there and they're going to stay longer. And when you factor that in, you will find that that can be a very, very big number, especially the professional services basis where skill is the differentiator in your business. And then finally, if we think of corporate value, the absolute core value of the company, taking the organic growth rate and the referrals, those are massive accelerators. And when we apply those accelerators, which means if I'm telling other people to come, we are growing new revenue at the greatest profitability level. A promoter who refers somebody into your company, that person comes to you at zero sales cost. That person comes to you thinking in a promoter mindset day one. All you have to do is execute against that referral and you have another promoter. So referrals from promoters are massively valuable. And if you keep track of them and are able to articulate them when you do your annual corporate valuation, you will find out that your company is much more valuable than its average. Okay, when you just average it, it actually reduces the total value of the company. When I do the standard tech programs, we spend about a half an hour understanding the true corporate value of improved customer experience, and it's a big eye opener. You will find that the fact is, if you spend money on improving their customer experience, you are affecting so many things in the company that the return is ridiculously high on the investment in these programs. One word on the company value on the detractor side, negative word of mouth. How much does it cost you when somebody has negative word of mouth in today's day and age? Everybody knows social media, referrals, references, Google reviews. You absolutely have to have a disciplined approach to managing that. So let me give you a short story here to illuminate this. So a little old lady goes into a grocery store. She goes in every week. She buys her groceries. She's walking out, 17-year-old Bruno served her. She's going out to her car. When she gets to her car, she drops her bag of oranges. They're all over the ground. She looks up. She's mad, but she's more embarrassed than mad, but she's going to display it as anger because she can. Because she's going to pick those oranges up and she's going to walk back into Bruno and say, these oranges are terrible, right? This bag broke. Now, most people would say, I'm sorry, ma'am, and go out and get him another bag of oranges and say, here you go, and she'll go away. But Bruno was trained in customer experience, and he knows that he's now got a moment of truth on his hands. And he says, that's terrible, ma'am. Is everything else okay? He gets onto her side and becomes an advocate of hers for the issue with his company. And he says, let's go back to the oranges. And he picks the navels, and he picks the Valencias and a couple of other types of oranges. Says, here, take this bag of each of the many different kinds of oranges and try them and keep track and let me know which one you like best, and come back next week. We'll make sure you get you the right oranges. He takes the bag out to the car and puts it in her car to make sure that everything's good and says no charge. She goes, gets in her car, drives home. What does she do that night? She goes to bingo that night. What does she do? She could say, hey, I went grocery shopping today, and everyone would go, blah, I'm bored. But she would say, you wouldn't believe what happened at my grocery shopping today. This happened. Bruno was a great kid, took care of my oranges. I've got these great oranges. Anybody wants, you should try the Valencias. They're really nice. I've never had them before. She has a story. She's advocating for Bruno. And now, not only did she stay, which kept them a client who was spending about $5,000 a year with them, so their lifetime value of that client was about $50,000, $60,000. She also generated the opportunity for all those referrals. And because she's going to tell this story about 60 times, 5 of those people come in, 5 of those people become customers. That bag of oranges is worth $300,000. And I challenge you to think about inside your organization, when have you had those moments of truth when you can make a difference, where you'll give somebody a story that provides a positive perception on your company? And I would suggest that most successful companies in tech, when I do this exercise, everybody comes up with a story. And then we say, okay, if that's the case, now just extend that out. What is the true financial impact on improving the customer experience? And you will find it's an absolutely stunning number. So you're probably thinking, how do we do this? Well, I want to start with strategy, right? So basically, Bill Gates says we have to keep our customers happy every day because there's innovation going on and somebody will take my business every day. So he doesn't focus on revenue. He focuses on something quite different. So what I want you to do is look at your strategy and say, where is it? And is it a customer-centric strategy? That's the first place you need to start. So we start with, most strategies today say, I'm trying to manage the purchase behavior so we can grow more revenue. And what I say is, why don't you spend more time focusing on the usage behaviors, because the usage behaviors will generate the much greater value for your organization. And if you think about the Airbnbs and the Amazons of the world, you know that that's what they do. They don't try and market the product. They just provide such a great product that everybody knows it's there and they use it. Transactional revenue, rather than focusing on saying how much did we sell, what we typically are going to try to do in customer experience realm is we're going to say, what's the depth of our relationship as represented by our renewals and our tenure? And renewals and tenure, when you map it out over 10 years, is more valuable than just getting new clients. You still have to do a lot of the stuff on the left, but improve your focus on the right here. And the final one I want to talk about is technology innovation. Technology innovation of itself is of no value. What I want people to do is to think about how are they changing, increasing the customer value, and in increasing the customer value, does technology help you do that? No technology should be done just because it's technology and everybody has it. You need to be able to constantly be able to articulate, how does this improvement investment, this initiative that we have, how is it going to improve the customer's journey so that they perceive greater value from us, right? So we talk a lot about how to think about your strategy to be starting the journey that takes multiple years to become customer centric. Now, in order to do that, as Ruth Ann asked in the first question break, was you have to have a discipline and a set of procedures. So first, yes, review your strategy and decide, are you serious? If you're serious, I'm going to tell you that there are a couple of things that you want to do. There are a few key steps, okay? Number 3, I'll just get all 3 of them up here in a second. Oh, what's going on here? There, all right? So the first thing is you have to have an intentional experience, all right? And what we suggest you do is look at your customer experience, and I'll take you through this in a minute, and you need to have an intentional experience. We use a concept called customer journey mapping to allow you to articulate and understand the customer's perspective of your business and their journey through your business, and identifying how you can improve that. The second thing you want to do is, whatever way you are currently measuring and managing the customer sat, so to speak, is ensure that you're implementing a closed loop process. So a closed loop process says when there's a gap identified between what you expect and what the customer perceives, do you have a method to drive improvement? That's it. And then finally, you want to think about this as a 3-year program. If it's going to be a 3-year program, you better have a governance model that allows you to say, here's how I'm going to establish my initiative, here's how I'm going to measure whether it's achieving its goals, and here's how I'm going to ensure long-term continuous improvement. That's governance. All 3 things. Those are the 3 things that you're going to have to do as an organization over the next couple of years to start really moving toward customer centricity. I'm going to walk you through customer journey mapping and closed loop right now, and then I'll summarize at that point. So let's talk about journey mapping first. When we talk about journey mapping, what we're saying is put yourself firmly in the shoes of a customer and observe and record the emotions and observations that they have when going through your business, and then say internally to everybody in your business, this is what the customer's experiencing, how do we improve it? You're not talking about a silo, you're saying our business is here to serve the customer, this is how they perceive us, how do we change things? So let me give you a simple example of when you're trying to move. You decide you want to move and you're going to phone the cable company, all right? If you ask the cable company, how are they doing on the moving process? They would say, well, our agent organization has a 90% effectiveness ratio. Our call center organization is 85% on their SAT score. The website is 85%, and our support organization is 90%. And so if you have to move, you probably are going to touch all those guys because you're going to book your move, you're going to have to reset your channels, you're going to have to be home the day they come to move your cable box, and then something's not going to work right and you're going to call for support. But the reality is, if I'm a customer, the likelihood of me having a great experience is if I'm covering all those things, I'm probably around a 60% likelihood to succeed. And that's not acceptable to any of us. We would never run a business with a 60% satisfaction rate. So what you have to do is step back and say, tell me about your total move, identify what are you seeing, doing, and feeling at each of those points, and say, where can we improve this process for you? In their case, the one I just talked about, it's quite simple. They just need to improve the information transfer point to point, because that's where, when they do the diagnostic work, they identify that that's actually where the problem is. They fix that, and suddenly the move is better. Because the move is better, that's a critical point in time. It's one of the only high touch points of a cable company. Then that's going to improve the perception, and that perception is going to lead to a better belief and a better behaviors in the future. So journey mapping is one thing, and what we're doing is trying to get you to rethink your business. And in the time of COVID, you're probably already doing this. There is a very well-structured practice called customer journey mapping, which uses a bunch of stickies, virtual stickies now, stickies to look at what is your customer seeing, thinking, doing, and feeling at every point in their experience, and then you look at where they're unhappy and start there. Second thing I'm going to talk about is the closed loop process. So the closed loop process is more of your operational model, and your operational model says, I'm going to do an interview with the customer, and when I do that interview, if I see something that's either positive or negative, I'm going to use that to propagate across the organization. So if some customer says, Derek's doing a great job, he's super responsive, I'm going to send that to everybody on Derek's team or everybody in Derek's role and say, hey, he's got really good ratings because his client thinks he's really super responsive. Everybody else sees that, and it reinforces the positive behavior. The flip side is we see that there's a gap, and I say, oh, it looks like this customer's unhappy. We need to address something about the way that their experience with us was. The senior manager might call the person directly, or he might coach me and say, Derek, you need to go talk to that customer. I go talk to that customer. I figure out how to resolve it. I figure out what we need to change in the future, and I record that. And now I've made a very tiny continuous improvement on the overall experience. As the CEO, what's nice is that if you implement this properly, when I have updated the how do we serve this customer better type thing in a database, an email is going to show up in my box, and it's going to say, hey, customer XYZ, that we're now going to ensure that we are responding to them within 2 hours. The next time I see that customer, I can say, hey, how are we doing? Are we still meeting our 2-hour commitment? And the customer is blown away because now he knows that he's not just in the reps world, but the actual owner of the company knows what's going on, and it changes the way they view the business. All right. So this closed loop process, not only do we address customer retention, but we drive coaching, we drive positive reinforcement, and we drive a better connection between the senior part of the organization who may not have a day-to-day contact with the customer and the customer, right? And then the final thing in closed loop that's really, really cool is that you now have all the data properly aggregated and available in dashboards and various things that allows you to do deeper root cause and strategic planning so that you can make those investments and actually you use this data to support your journey mapping initiatives. So these two things are basically, this is measuring the experience and journey map is setting the expectation and designing the experience. And by having just these two fundamental activities clearly operationally implemented in your business, you're in much better shape to be approaching moving toward becoming a more customer-centric company. Okay, I want to stop here and ask that's kind of the nickel tour of how you approach and think about customer experience in today's economy. I'll open it to questions before I go to the next step. Any questions at this time?
We don't have questions right now, but obviously this is something that has to be quite intentional and very, very thought through. And I really appreciate you've kind of had to run through this really quickly. And I want people to know, Derek, as you've mentioned, is that you can be booked to go through that journey mapping and the closed loop experience and a lot of the strategic steps with members and with our groups. So excellent.
Okay.
I think everybody's probably writing notes, so carry on.
Beautiful. Feel free to, I'll put the contact information up later, and obviously we'll invite you to contact us. So what do? When I finish my programs, and what I do, we've built more customer experience programs probably than any other person per capita. I've done probably 25 in the last 10 years. What I've learned is that the biggest problem is you give this job to an executive, to a shooter, somebody's doing a good job in your company, and you say, look, I need you to go deal with our customer experience stuff. And they go out and try to measure the satisfaction, which is just not the right thing to do. They need to start with the strategy, they need to start with the journey mapping and an intentional journey, and they have to start with the concept of closed loop operational implementation, not measure this stuff. The measuring isn't going to get you anywhere. So what I want you to do is educate yourself. And this became so important to us. Like I said, I've done my company's done a bunch of manipulation in this space to ensure that we have an education model. And the one that is particularly compelling is that if you decide, hey, I want Bob here to take the lead and really implement a customer experience program, you will waste a bunch of time and money trying to build a little measurement process that you haven't thought through, or you'll hire a consultant to come up with a strategy that's not your own strategy. I absolutely believe that customer experience must be an intrinsic, organic commitment of the company. So therefore, we built this program that's called Customer Experience Leadership and Implementation, and it's an 11-week workshop-based course. And we do 2.5 hours a week, but at the end of it, the beautiful thing is whoever's taking that course, at the end of it, they are capable and highly likely to be able to implement a customer experience program themselves. They will have a strategy, and they will know what they need to have thought of within 11 weeks, instead of, I can write you a strategy in 2 days and charge you $30,000, but really this is a much better model. All right, so I really like this, and I encourage all of our clients, when I'm building them a system, I say you need to take this course as well. So we run this course, quarterly. Every quarter we run an 11-week course like this. It's a great program. We have a bunch of tech people who are now attending this. The second thing is to take action. If you are keen on this and your momentum is building, right? What I do for a lot of clients, for the tech clients, especially after the calls, is obviously I offer the 30-minute consult. Anne-Marie, who heads up our Acceleration Academy, can coordinate that for you. And we'll do a 30-minute consult on where are you and what really should you be doing, just to ease your mind on what your next steps really should be. So we'll do that anytime for anybody in the tech community, and we've done that for a lot of people. So those are your two major takeaways here. All right, I've told you what you need to do. Think about journeys. Think about, are you really driving operational improvement from your measurement activities? And do you have a plan that really has a 3-year perspective versus 2 months perspective? Okay, so in our deck here, I don't know if we distribute these decks, but we do have the links to our something called the Acceleration Academy. It's at the website called www.accelerationstrategy.com. You'll see all of this stuff if you wanted to read any more about the programs and offerings that we have. And actually, there's one thing that we are launching in the new year that's kind of cool. Is if an executive just wants to get a good drown proofing, we'll come in and do that as well. And that doesn't really get you the program, but it gets you the understanding of the strategic things that you need to do. Kind of more of a strategic view. The other one is really more about how are the people who are going to drive and really improve their career as a result of their investments in customer experience. Okay, and that's kind of all I wanted to cover today, really. I'm welcome anybody who wants to have additional conversations. Our contact details are here. You're welcome to email either Anne-Marie or I, and we'd be happy to help you in any way. And obviously, I'm looking forward to spending more time with the team groups because we really go deep in those tech sessions, and we really go deep on the financials and the impact on your actual businesses. So that's been a lot of fun that we've been doing in the fourth quarter this year.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah. I just want everybody to know that this has been recorded. There's a lot of information here, and I know that I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to watch it with my team as well, again, to go through some of this. And so it will be recorded, and it will be on our Tech Canada website, available to anyone. And so feel free that if you didn't get a chance to kind of copy down some of this information from Derek or his contact, it will be there. And I do encourage everyone to take advantage of that 30-minute chat with Derek and his team, with Anne-Marie, to be able to say, okay, where do we start and where are we right now? So, and where do we want to be? Most importantly, where do you want to be? Any last words here, Derek? Great stuff. We're getting a few comments, and Jim is thanking you for the science of customer engagement. And I think that, anytime we can actually look at data, how rich is that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of science in here, and I do a lot of work on brain science and how you can accentuate the perceptions and beliefs through the programs as well.
So Gilles had a question here. Well, we still have a couple of minutes, and Gilles' question was, when you mentioned customer experience, what are your thoughts about anyone's experience? Therefore, their similar behavior, attitude, their journey with business partners, is anyone a part of the customer experience? Who are we focusing on? Is it just your client?
No, the experience management is the actual discipline. We talk about customer experience because that's really what people focus on, but the discipline, everything I've talked about, is around experience management. So if you have a meaningful relationship with somebody that could be influencing your business, we call them being part of the customer experience ecosystem, then you probably want to have a strategy for dealing with them. You may not be measuring them, but you certainly have to have some strategy for engaging them to ensure that they're contributing to a positive. So, you think of your board of directors, you think of your partners, you think of your brokers, your middlemen, you think of the bloggers who talk about you. All of those people are shaping your customer experience. So it might be too much to cover the waterfront for all of them, but for those that that you believe are truly impacting your business, you want to have a strategy for managing every stakeholder.
And on that vein, you brought up something that's really quite close to my heart, and that's retention. Because you talked about not only your client retention, but your staff retention is intrinsically linked to customers, to that net promoter. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's actually 6 disciplines in customer experience management, which I didn't want to go too deep on that, but there are 6 disciplines in there, and it starts with strategy and governance, and then we go through all the understanding customers, understanding how to design solutions, how to deliver solutions, how to measure and manage the customer experience, and then the final one is the culture of your organization. How do you ensure that your culture is in alignment with your customer experience management? So we really now we don't think so much about customer experience versus employee experience. We think of it in an organization, we think of it as a practice called experience management, and it's the two together. And one of the cool things I talk about is that when you have a higher retention rate than your competition for your employees, when your employee retention rate is higher than your competition, your investments in employee development have a higher return than your competition because they stay longer and they make better return on those investments. All right. So it is a really that employee retention driving customer retention circle is really quite a virtuous circle. So
that's amazing. Yeah. You just reminded me of, there's a restaurant here in Calgary called Highs, and they've had some of the same wait staff there for like 30 years. And that speaks volumes as a customer when you come in, is that this is an organization that people want to be a part of as well.
Yeah, I talk about Daniel Pink's motivational approach to employees, and that's what Highs does. Those people have the freedom to do the job the way they want within the constraint of the restaurant, and they're rewarded for it, and they're mastering what they decide to do. And it's this concept of Daniel Pink on motivation. If you haven't read it, you should really look at his material, his TED Talk. It's phenomenal. So we talk about how that applies to customer experience as well in our programs.
Wonderful. Well, we're pretty close to the top of the hour, and I want to thank you again, Derek, for taking us through this very quick, and I would call it negotiating the rapids in a kayak here of customer experience, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And I want to again remind everybody that if you want to go back through this, it will be on our tech websites shortly, and also to reach out to Derek. So once again, to everybody, thank you for joining us this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are in Canada. And thank you again, Derek. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ruth. All right.